On my son's wedding day, my daughter-in-law raised a toast, auction to take my sick mother-in-law away. My son laughed and said, "I'll give $8. The whole room laughed at me. But when a stranger's deep voice cut through the noise and said, "I'll give 3 million, she fainted on the spot. I had spent that entire morning trying to look my best for this day. Not for me, but for my only child. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, staring at the navy blue dress I had bought for this very moment. At 62, I didn't pretend to be the young woman I once was, but I still wanted to stand tall, proud, and presentable for my son's special day. The dress had cost more than I normally allowed myself to spend, but this wasn't just any occasion. It was James's wedding. My James. 3 years had passed since Richard died, and the silence in our home had never stopped echoing. James was all I had left. He had been my anchor through the grief, or so I thought. Now, looking back, I realize I wasn't his anchor. I was simply convenient when he needed something. I leaned closer to the mirror and applied my lipstick, the same shade of rose I had worn to my own wedding 38 years ago. My hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the strange mixture of nerves and hope. A part of me believed that today I was not just gaining a daughter-in-law named Chloe. Maybe I was finally gaining the daughter I had always wanted. How naive I was. The drive to the venue took nearly an hour, and I spent every minute imagining how proud Richard would have been. James had always looked so much like his father, but when I saw him standing at the altar in his black tuxedo, the resemblance nearly stole my breath. Yet where Richard had looked at me with nothing but love on our wedding day, James barely glanced at me when I arrived. "Mom, you made it," he said, offering a quick, perfunctory hug, the kind you'd give a distant aunt at a funeral. His tone was polite but cold. "Of course, I made it, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss this for the world." But he had already turned away before I finished, his attention caught by a group of guests. I stood there, invisible, until I quietly made my way to find my seat, only to realize I wasn't sitting anywhere near my son. At the front table sat James, Chloe, her parents, her siblings, and even distant cousins I barely knew. My name card was at table 13, tucked in the back corner, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. "There must be a mistake," I said to the wedding planner, a young woman with a bright smile and a clipboard clutched in her hands. "Name: Margaret Ellis. Mother of the groom." She scanned her list. "Yes, table 13. That's correct." "As requested by whom?" I asked quietly, though I already knew the answer. She didn't reply, just offered a polite smile before moving on. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to walk toward the back without making a scene. The ceremony itself was beautiful. White roses everywhere, warm lighting, a string quartet playing softly. I wanted so badly to enjoy it, but every time I looked at Chloe, I couldn't ignore the smirk she gave me, as if she was already reminding me of my place in her version of this family. After the vows and kiss, the reception began. Laughter and champagne filled the room. I sat at my table with strangers, pretending to enjoy small talk about the weather. One older gentleman, impeccably dressed and with kind eyes, sat quietly beside me. "You seem out of place too," I whispered. He gave me a soft smile. Sometimes the most important moments happen on the sidelines. I didn't understand then, but I would soon. The toasts began. Chloe's father spoke warmly, welcoming James into their family. James spoke next, praising Chloe's beauty, her intelligence, and how lucky he felt. Not once did he mention me, thank me, or acknowledge the years I had raised him alone after his father's death. Then Chloe stood. Her smile was wide, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "I have a special toast," she said, raising her champagne glass. "But first, a little fun. As many of you know, James's mother, Margaret, has been feeling unwell lately." She paused, letting the room quiet. "She's been such a burden. Such a concern for poor James. So I thought, why not have a little auction? Who wants to take home a sick mother-in-law?" Laughter spread through the room, some shocked, some entertained. My face burned as my hands clenched the napkin in my lap. "Come on, James," Chloe pressed. "What would you bid for your dear mother?" He grinned, my son, my only son, and said, $8. The room roared with laughter. I sat frozen, my heart splintering with every chuckle. Every sacrifice I had made, 2 jobs, selling my wedding ring to buy him a car, giving up my own dream so he could have his, was reduced to a joke worth $8. That's when the man beside me stood. His deep voice cut through the noise like a blade. 3 million. The room fell silent. Chloe's glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. James's smile vanished as he stared at the stranger, who now stood tall. His dark eyes locked on Chloe with a look that made the air feel heavy. The words, 3 million, didn't just hang in the air. They seemed to press down on the room, stealing the sound out of it. People froze. Champagne glasses mid-air. Somewhere in the back, a fork clinked against a plate and then stopped. I turned my head slowly toward the man who had been sitting beside me all evening. He had been so quiet, so unassuming, that I'd barely noticed him after our brief exchange. Now, he looked nothing like a quiet guest. He stood tall, his posture straight, his presence commanding. Chloe's mouth hung open, her painted lips trembling as if she wasn't sure whether to laugh or panic. James stared at the man, his brows knitted, his pale face betraying confusion and something else, a flicker of unease. The man repeated himself, slower this time, his voice smooth but firm. $3 million. For the privilege of caring for this remarkable woman. My breath caught. He was talking about me. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had described me as remarkable. Certainly not my own son. Not in years. The stranger glanced down at me, and for the briefest moment, the corners of his lips curved into a smile, a knowing, almost familiar smile, before he looked back at Chloe. This isn't funny, Chloe said, her voice shaking but her eyes darting quickly, scanning the room, no doubt calculating how she could spin this. No, he said evenly. It's not funny. It's disgraceful. That's when something stirred in my memory. The way his voice carried, the way his dark eyes seemed to look straight through people. I knew that face. Or maybe I knew it from another lifetime. He turned back to me, his gaze softening. Hello, Margaret, he said quietly, and my heart skipped. My name on his lips. It was like I was 22 again. It came rushing back. A fluorescent-lit hospital corridor, the sharp scent of antiseptic, the sound of hurried footsteps. I was a young nurse back then, fresh out of training. He was a medical resident, brilliant and intense, with dreams so big they barely fit into words. His name was Kareem. The room around me blurred for a moment, the clinking glasses, the stiff air, the disapproving stares fading into the background. I saw him as he had been back then. Dark hair, a confident walk, hands steady even in chaos. We had stolen moments together, back when I'd been engaged to Richard. Nights spent on the edge of something dangerous and beautiful, talking about the stars over his hometown, the olive trees outside his bedroom window, the future he wanted to build helping people. And now, 40 years later, here he was, in the middle of my humiliation, standing like some unshakable pillar between me and the cruelty that had just been hurled at me. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. Kareem! His eyes softened further, and I could see the years in them, years that hadn't dulled the way he looked at me. It's been a long time. James shifted beside Chloe, clearly impatient to take control of whatever was happening. I'm sorry, who exactly are you? He asked, his voice tinged with defensiveness. Kareem didn't look at him. He kept his gaze fixed on me, like the rest of the room wasn't even there. I'm someone who knows when a woman is worth far more than $8. The way he said it, the air seemed to hum. My chest ached in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not from pain, but from the shock of being seen. Truly seen. Chloe's composure cracked for a split second, her face paling before she caught herself. 3 million? You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious, Kareem replied, his tone so calm it was unsettling. And frankly, she's worth far more than that. I felt my throat tighten, the humiliation of earlier colliding with something else. Something warm, dangerous, and entirely unexpected. The silence in the room stretched thin. You could almost hear people breathing. James shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. Chloe's hand tightened around his arm like a vice. Kareem took a step closer to me, his voice lower now, but every syllable still carried. You don't have to sit here and be degraded. Not while I'm here. And for the first time that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. Hearing his voice pull me back from the edge of humiliation felt almost unreal. My hands, still gripping the napkin from earlier, loosened without me realizing it. I was staring at him, but my mind was split, half trapped in the blinding lights of this ballroom, half slipping away to another lifetime. 40 years ago, I had met Kareem on a quiet Tuesday night in the cardiac ward. I'd been a young nurse, only months into the job, still learning how to steady my hands when alarms blared. He had been the new resident, already drawing whispers from the other nurses. Brilliant, confident, impossibly focused. I remember the first time we spoke beyond the usual. "Can you hand me that?" It was after a grueling resuscitation. We were both exhausted, sitting on opposite sides of the nurses' station, breathing heavily but unwilling to leave. "You have gentle hands," he'd said suddenly, his voice carrying that rich accent I couldn't place at first. Then, after a pause, "Gentle, but strong. That's rare." Richard, my fiancé at the time, had never said things like that. He saw me as dependable, not exceptional. Kareem made me feel like maybe I could be both. We hadn't planned to fall into anything dangerous. But after that night, we found excuses to linger near each other's shifts. He'd bring me tea from the hospital cafeteria. I'd laugh at his quiet jokes during tense procedures. We began talking about things we'd never shared with anyone else. His childhood under desert skies, my dreams of traveling that I'd tucked away because they didn't fit the life my parents approved of. One night, after stabilizing a patient, we found ourselves alone in the break room. He leaned against the counter, head lowered, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I shouldn't be here," he said. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be," I told him, even though I didn't know if I meant the hospital or something else entirely. "No, Margaret. I shouldn't be falling in love with someone who belongs to another man." The world seemed to stop in that moment. My chest tightened. "Kareem, I know you're engaged. I know it's wrong. But I can't stop thinking about you." He looked up, eyes dark and searching. "When I finish here, I'm supposed to go back home to take over my family's medical practice. But all I want is to stay here with you." I should have walked away. But instead, I stepped toward him. "I think about you too." That was the start of 6 months of stolen moments. A quiet corner in the hospital cafeteria, shared glances across crowded corridors, walks to the parking lot long after our shifts ended. He would bring me small gifts, a book of poetry, a bracelet made of beads from a market he'd found. I began to imagine a life that was entirely different from the one waiting for me with Richard. But I was 22, and fear is a powerful thing. Fear of disappointing my parents, of making the wrong choice, of stepping into a life I didn't know how to navigate. The night before I was supposed to finalize wedding plans with Richard, Kareem came to me one last time. His residency was over. He was leaving the next day. "This is your last chance," he said, his voice low but steady. "Come with me. We'll build something beautiful together." I remember standing in that cold hospital hallway, my engagement ring feeling heavy on my finger. He offered passion, adventure, a life unplanned. Richard offered safety, stability, approval. And I chose safety. Kareem left without another word. I married Richard 6 months later. I told myself I'd made the right choice. And for years I believed it. But now, here he was, standing in front of me at my son's wedding, offering $3 million, not to buy me, but to lift me out of the cruelest moment of my life. James's voice broke the silence in the ballroom. "Mom, who is this man?" Kareem's eyes never left mine. Someone who never stopped caring about her. James's voice sounded sharper this time, almost accusing. "Mom, who is this man?" Kareem finally shifted his gaze toward my son, but his expression didn't change. His face stayed calm, steady, like someone who had no reason to be intimidated. "I'm someone," Kareem said evenly, "who knows the value of the woman you've been mocking." There was a ripple through the guests. You could feel it, the discomfort, the whispers starting again. People leaned toward each other, murmuring behind raised glasses, their eyes flicking between Kareem, me, and the head table. Chloe straightened in her chair, her smile tight, but her tone dripping with condescension. $3 million? That's ridiculous. You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," Kareem replied. "In fact, I'd say she's worth far more than that." The way he said it made my throat close. 4 years, I'd been spoken to in numbers, the cost of a gift, the price of help, the amount someone could spare for me. This was the first time anyone had put a number on my worth and meant it as respect, not a negotiation. James cleared his throat, trying to reclaim control. "Look, I appreciate you defending my mom, but this This is a family matter. Kareem gave a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. A family matter? I've seen families protect each other. What I saw tonight was not family. It was cruelty. Cruelty disguised as entertainment. His words hit the room like a slap. I saw several guests shift uncomfortably. Some looked down at their plates. A few even seemed ashamed. Chloe's father's face went red. We didn't know she was going to do this, he said quickly, glancing at his daughter. Chloe, what were you thinking? Chloe didn't answer him. Her eyes were on Kareem now, scanning him the way a hunter sizes up prey. Mr. Al-Rashid, Kareem said. Kareem Al-Rashid. There was a faint gasp from somewhere near the front table. People knew the name. I saw James's head jerk slightly, recognition dawning. Wait. Al-Rashid Medical? He asked, his voice suddenly smaller. That's correct. Kareem's tone didn't change. I'm the CEO. James blinked, his face draining of color. That's you. Yes, Kareem said simply, and then without looking away from my son, added, and I knew your mother long before you were born. I've never stopped caring for her well-being. The whispers grew louder. Chloe's eyes narrowed, but the calculating glint in them only sharpened. Well, if we'd known who you were, she said with a little laugh, we might have treated Mrs. Ellis with more respect. That's when Kareem's voice turned ice cold. If you'd known she had a connection to money, you mean. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. The words seemed to hit Chloe harder than she expected. Her smile faltered. James shifted again, clearly uncomfortable. Look, can we maybe handle this somewhere private? Kareem shook his head. No. This was public. My answer will be public. He turned to the room, his voice rising enough for every guest to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed was a son allowing his mother to be humiliated in front of you all. A daughter-in-law orchestrating it for laughs. I want you to remember that. I felt the heat rush to my face, not from shame this time, but from the strange power of having someone defend me without hesitation. Chloe forced a smile again, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was just a joke, she said, the fake sweetness gone from her voice. A joke, I finally said, my voice louder than I meant it to be. A joke is funny to everyone involved. This was not a joke. This was you telling me I'm worth less than a meal at a diner. James looked at me, his mouth opening to speak, but I held up my hand. No. You don't get to, Mom. Please me after what you just did. $8. That's what you said. After everything I've done for you. After every sacrifice. That's all I was worth to you tonight. There was another silence, this one heavier. The clinking of glasses had stopped completely. Kareem stepped a little closer to me, his voice low now, but carrying enough to be heard by the nearest tables. You don't have to explain yourself to people who don't value you. Something in me cracked then. The tears I'd been holding back since Chloe first raised that champagne glass finally broke free. Not hot, humiliating tears, but a release, like something I'd been holding inside for years was finally allowed out. James's voice came again, strained now. How do you two know each other? Kareem glanced at him briefly, then back at me. We knew each other many years ago. Before she married your father. I never forgot her. James stared at him, still processing. And what's this about $3 million? Kareem's voice softened only when he looked at me. It's not about the money. It's about making it clear that she's priceless compared to the way you just treated her. The guests were hanging on every word now. And for the first time in a very long time, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving this moment. I was reclaiming it. The silence between us felt thick, like the air before a storm. People were still watching, some pretending not to, but their eyes kept darting back toward us. You could almost feel the heat of the stares on my skin. James finally exhaled, rubbing his forehead. Mom, please. Let's not do this here. We're already doing this here, I said, my voice steady now. You started it in front of 300 people. You don't get to move it behind closed doors just because you're embarrassed. Chloe leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, her voice taking on a sugary tone that made my stomach turn. Mr. Al-Rashid, you have to understand. This was harmless fun. Just a light moment to make people laugh. Kareem's expression didn't change. You turned this woman into a punchline at her own son's wedding. That isn't harmless. That's calculated humiliation. Chloe's smile tightened, but her eyes flashed with something sharp, the same look I'd seen when she'd first met me, like she was measuring me and deciding I didn't add up to much. You don't know anything about our family, she said coolly. I know enough, Kareem said. His voice was low, but every word was like a stone dropped in still water. I know that families should protect each other, not sell each other off like items at a market. James stood then, clearly desperate to steer this away from a scene he couldn't control. Look, can we step outside? Just for a minute. Kareem didn't move. No. We're going to talk about this right here, because the humiliation was public. He turned his gaze to James. Tell me, James, where do you work? James blinked, caught off guard. Henderson Medical Supply. Why? And do you know who owns 60% of Henderson Medical Supply? Kareem asked, his tone still calm. James frowned, glancing around like maybe someone else would answer for him. No, I don't. I do, Kareem said, not giving him the chance to finish. I own it. My company acquired Henderson last year. The words landed like a dropped glass. Sharp, sudden, and impossible to ignore. James froze, his eyes darting to Chloe, whose grip on his arm tightened. Wait, James said slowly. You're my boss? Kareem's lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. Indirectly. I don't manage day-to-day operations, but I approve leadership. I approve contracts. And I read reports about employee performance and company culture. The threat wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. The meaning was clear. Chloe's expression shifted instantly, her hostility softening into something more like charm. Mr. Al-Rashid, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. I think, Kareem said, his voice even colder now, you showed me exactly who you are. And I believe people when they show me their true nature. James looked from Kareem to me, his face pale, his lips pressed into a tight line. Mom, what is going on here? How do you know this man? I held his gaze, refusing to look away. I knew him long before I knew your father. He cared about me then. And tonight, he cared about me when you didn't. James flinched, the words hitting harder than I expected. He started to speak, but I kept going. You think you can stand there and say $8 like it's nothing. But every time you laugh at me, every time you treat me like I'm in your way, you put a price tag on me. And tonight, you told the whole world exactly what you think I'm worth. For a moment, James looked like he might say he was sorry. His mouth opened, his shoulders slumped, but then Chloe's hand squeezed his arm again, and the flicker of remorse in his eyes dimmed. Kareem stepped forward slightly, his voice quiet but cutting through the silence. Do you know what I see when I look at her? I see the strongest woman I've ever met. I see someone who worked 2 jobs to raise you, who gave up her own dreams so you could chase yours. And I see a son who doesn't realize he's throwing away the most valuable person in his life. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I'd waited years for my son to defend me like that. And now it was coming from someone else entirely. Chloe, still holding James's arm, tilted her head and smiled sweetly at Kareem. Well, maybe we could all just start over. I'm sure if we talked privately. No, Kareem interrupted, his tone final. I have no interest in starting over with people who treat others as disposable. And I certainly have no interest in spending any more time with you. Her smile faltered, and for the first time that night, I saw the faintest hint of fear in her eyes. James looked down at the floor, his voice barely above a whisper. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would hurt you like that. You didn't think, I said quietly, because you weren't thinking about me at all. You were thinking about making people laugh. The weight of that truth hung in the air, and for once, my son didn't try to argue. Kareem turned to me, his voice soft again. Margaret, you don't have to stay here. And in that moment, I realized, I really didn't. Kareem's words echoed in my head. You don't have to stay here. I sat there for a heartbeat longer, the noise of the room pressing in around me. Glasses clinking again. Low murmurs. The occasional cough. But under it all, I could still hear my own pulse, fast and uneven. My eyes drifted to the head table, where Chloe was trying to smile like she still had control. James sat stiff beside her, jaw tight, eyes darting between me and Kareem as if he couldn't decide which side of his own life to defend. 4 years, I'd been the one smoothing over scenes like this. I'd been the fixer, the quiet one who'd swallow her pride for the sake of peace. I'd been the one telling myself it's not worth the fight, because fights cost too much, and silence kept the family together. Or so I thought. But tonight, there was no silence left to hide behind. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I had carried through grief after his father died, the boy I had scraped together money for so he could have the things his friends had. I thought of the nights I'd worked 2 shifts in a row, coming home to a sleeping 12-year-old, too tired to eat. I thought of the time I sold the last piece of jewelry Richard had ever given me just to cover James's first car, so he wouldn't have to take the bus to his job. $8. That was my return. Kareem's hand touched the back of my chair. Not heavy, not possessive, just there. Steady. Warm. The kind of touch that didn't push, didn't demand, only reminded me I had an option. Chloe's voice cut in, trying for charm but landing somewhere closer to desperate. Margaret, surely you can see this is just, well, it's gotten out of hand. Let's sit back down, enjoy the night. You've worked so hard for this wedding. Don't ruin it over a misunderstanding. I turned my head slowly to her. A misunderstanding is forgetting my coffee order. A misunderstanding is being late because of traffic. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Chloe. This was you making sure everyone here knew exactly where you think I belong. She blinked, lips parting, but no words came out. James shifted in his seat. Mom, please. Can we just not do this here? Not like this. Not like this. My voice was calm, but it didn't shake this time. James, you made it like this. You didn't stand up for me when she mocked me. You joined her. His mouth tightened, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, or maybe just the realization that this wasn't going away quietly. I stood slowly, my legs steady now. The scrape of my chair against the floor seemed louder than it should have been. I think, I said, glancing at Kareem, I'm done here. The room stilled again, like someone had hit pause. James half rose from his chair. You're leaving? In the middle of my wedding? Yes, I said simply. You can't just walk out. I can, I said, and I am. Kareem stepped aside to let me pass, but stayed close enough that I could feel his presence beside me. Every step toward the exit felt like shedding a layer of something I'd been carrying for years. Guilt, obligation, the weight of being needed but never valued. As we reached the doorway, the wedding planner hurried toward us, her clipboard clutched to her chest. Mrs. Ellis, please. People are asking questions. Some guests are leaving. What should I tell them? I paused, glancing over my shoulder at the room, at the tables of faces. Some curious, some pitying, some uncomfortable. My eyes landed on James. He was still standing, looking at me with a mixture of shock and something close to panic. Tell them, I said clearly, that the mother of the groom has left the building. Gasps. Murmurs. Phones lifting to capture the moment. I didn't care. Kareem and I stepped out into the cool night air. The sound of the party dulled as the door shut behind us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Where would you like to go? He asked finally, his voice low, almost gentle. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I don't know. I haven't thought past getting out of there. Coffee? He suggested. I nodded. We walked to his car, a sleek black Mercedes that looked as out of place in the gravel parking lot as he had in that room full of forced smiles. He opened the door for me, and as I settled into the seat, I felt an unfamiliar calm start to settle in. As we drove away, the lights of the venue fading in the rearview mirror, I kept expecting the guilt to hit. The guilt that always came when I disappointed James, the guilt that kept me in situations I didn't deserve. But it didn't come. Instead, there was something else. Relief. At the cafe, the few customers inside barely glanced up. We found a quiet booth in the corner. Kareem ordered 2 coffees and slid one toward me. The warmth seeped into my palms as I wrapped my hands around the cup. I keep waiting to feel bad, I said quietly. For walking out. For making a scene. But I don't. Good, Kareem said simply. You shouldn't feel bad for refusing to be someone's target. He's my son, I said. He held my gaze. That doesn't give him the right to treat you like that. Love doesn't excuse cruelty. I stared into my coffee for a moment, then let the truth spill out. I think I've been invisible to him for years. You were never invisible to me, Kareem said. His voice was softer now, almost tender. Even after all these years, you're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. The words hit somewhere deep, somewhere I didn't think could still feel this way. I smiled faintly, shaking my head. Why didn't you ever marry? His eyes dropped to his cup, turning it slowly in his hands. I tried once. 10 years after I left. But on the day of the wedding, I realized I couldn't go through with it. My heart was still somewhere else. With me? I asked, almost afraid of the answer. With you, he said without hesitation. We sat in silence then, the weight of 40 years between us. Years lost, choices made, lives built separately. And yet here we were. The coffee had gone lukewarm in my hands by the time my phone began to buzz on the table. The sound felt louder than it was, sharp and insistent in the quiet cafe. I didn't have to check the screen to know who it was. James. I stared at the phone, letting it vibrate. A part of me, the old part of me, the one trained to respond immediately to my son's needs, wanted to answer. To soothe. To make it better for him. But that part of me had been bleeding for decades, and tonight, I wasn't sure I had anything left to give. It stopped ringing. Then the texts began. Mom, please come back. We need to talk. The guests are asking questions. This is humiliating. Chloe is crying. You're ruining our wedding. I slid the phone toward Kareem. He picked it up and read each one slowly, his brow tightening. Notice, he said quietly, that not one of these messages says, I'm sorry. He was right. Every word was about their embarrassment, their discomfort, their need to fix the image, not the hurt they'd caused me. The phone began to ring again, James's name glowing on the screen. Answer it, Kareem said softly, if you want to, but not because you feel you owe him anything. I took a slow breath and picked it up. Hello. Mom, thank God, James said quickly. Where are you? You need to come back right now. No, James. I don't. What do you mean, no? This is my wedding day. You can't just leave. I can, I said, and I did. There was a pause. But people are talking. They're saying horrible things about us. What they're saying is true, I replied. You humiliated your mother at your own wedding. Chloe orchestrated a cruel joke, and when someone defended me, you were more worried about appearances than my feelings. It was just a joke, Mom. God, you're being so dramatic. A joke is funny for everyone involved, James. What happened tonight was bullying. There was another pause. Then a different voice came on the line. Smooth, sharp, and dripping with entitlement. Mabel, this is ridiculous, Chloe said. You're acting like a child. Come back here and apologize to our guests. I almost laughed. Apologize? For what? For embarrassing us. For bringing that man and causing a scene. I didn't bring Kareem to cause a scene, I interrupted. He defended me because you and James were treating me like garbage. How convenient that your rich boyfriend showed up just when you needed him, she said slyly. How long have you been planning this performance? Put my son back on the phone, Chloe, I said, my voice cold. You have 1 minute before I hang up and block both your numbers. You wouldn't dare. I hung up. Without hesitating, I blocked them both, then powered the phone off completely. Kareem watched me quietly. Feel better? I exhaled, and for the first time in years, I did. Yes. We sat there in the quiet for a while, the hum of the espresso machine in the background. Kareem leaned forward slightly, his hands folded on the table. Mabel, I want to ask you something. And I want you to know, whatever your answer is, I'll respect it completely. My heart thudded once, hard. All right. Come with me, he said simply. Come to Dubai. Let me show you the life we could have had, the life we could still have. My home is by the Persian Gulf. We can travel, see the world, spend whatever time we have left actually living instead of just surviving. I stared at him, my pulse racing. Kareem, I'm 62 years old. I'm not the woman you fell in love with. Neither am I the young man who loved you, he said with a faint smile. We're both older, wiser, more aware of how little time we really have. My feelings for you haven't changed, Mabel. If anything, they've grown. What about James? I asked softly. What about him? Kareem tilted his head slightly. After tonight, do you really think he'll welcome you back out of love? Or will it be because he's afraid of what I might mean for his career? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both knew the truth. You've spent your whole life putting other people's needs before your own, Kareem said. When is it going to be your turn? I looked down at my hands. My phone, even turned off, seemed to carry the weight of every demand, every guilt trip, every expectation I'd carried for years. I'm scared, I admitted. Of what? Of choosing wrong again. Of giving up everything. And regretting it. Kareem reached across the table and took my hands in his. The same way he had 40 years ago when he'd first asked me to come with him. The only thing you'll regret, he said quietly, is wasting more time on people who don't value you. I can't promise it will be easy. But I can promise you'll never again have to wonder if you're loved. I looked into his eyes. Dark, steady, and familiar. And I realized. I already knew my answer. 3 weeks later, my house looked nothing like a home. The living room was a maze of cardboard boxes and packing tape. The walls bare where family photos had once hung. Every room echoed with emptiness. I had sold or donated most of my furniture, keeping only a few things I couldn't bear to part with. A quilt my grandmother had made, the wedding china that had survived decades, and one framed photograph of James from his college graduation. In the picture, his arm was around my shoulders, both of us smiling like we had the world ahead of us. Kareem had gone back to Dubai temporarily to make arrangements, but before leaving, he spent every day with me. We sorted through 40 years of belongings together, laughing over old keepsakes, falling quiet over memories that hurt too much to linger on. Every night, we talked, really talked, about the lives we'd led apart and what we could build together now. I was taping up the last kitchen box when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw James's car in the driveway. My stomach tightened. I had been expecting this visit, but I didn't know if I was ready for it. When I opened the door, James stood there, looking tired, his tuxedo-perfect posture replaced with a slump I hardly recognized. Behind him, Chloe sat in the passenger seat of the car, her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. "Mom," he said quietly. "James." He glanced past me at the stacks of boxes. "So, it's true. You're really leaving?" "Yes." "When?" "Tomorrow." He shifted his weight, his eyes dropping to the porch. "Can we talk? I mean really talk. Not like at the wedding." I stepped aside and let him in. The house felt smaller with him inside. The air heavier. We stood in the middle of the half-empty living room, boxes between us like barriers we couldn't cross. "I know I messed up," he started. "Messed up?" I asked, not unkindly, but not softening my voice either. "James, you humiliated me in front of 300 people. You reduced me to $8. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice." His jaw tightened. "It was stupid. It was cruel. I know that now. But you're my mother. You can't just leave." "Why not?" He blinked at me, caught off guard. "Because you're my mother," he repeated, as if the title alone was reason enough. "And what does that mean to you?" I asked. "What does being your mother entitle me to?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly searching for an answer that didn't sound hollow. "It means family. Family supports each other. Family doesn't mock each other for sport," I said. "Family doesn't treat each other like burdens." He swallowed hard. "I want to make it up to you." "How?" He didn't answer right away. His silence told me everything. He didn't know how to make it up because he'd never thought about valuing me beyond what I could do for him. "What about him?" James asked suddenly, his voice sharper now. "This guy you barely know." "I've known Kareem longer than I knew your father when I married him," I said. "And in 3 weeks, he's shown me more respect and kindness than you have in years." James shook his head. "He's using you, Mom. Men like that, they don't fall for women your age." "He wants something." "Women like me?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean old useless, worth about $8? He winced. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant. And you're wrong. Kareem loved me when I was 22 and had nothing. He loves me now, when I have even less in the world's eyes. except my own worth, which he sees even when you don't. From the car, Chloe honked the horn, a short impatient blare that made James glance toward the driveway. He looked back at me, a trace of desperation in his voice. Look, Mom. Chloe thinks maybe we could work something out. We could have dinner once a month. You could babysit when we have kids. We could be a real family. Once a month, I repeated, my voice flat. How generous. His tone grew frustrated. What do you want from me? You want me to beg? Get on my knees. I want you to love me, I said simply. Not need me. Not use me. Love me. But you don't, do you, James? You've never learned how. His face fell. He didn't argue. I don't know how to do this without you, he said finally, voice low. Life. Marriage. Being an adult. You've always been there to fix things, to pay for things, to make it okay. And now, I said gently, you'll have to learn. It'll be good for you. Chloe honked again. Longer this time, the sound sharp enough to cut the air between us. James looked toward the door, then back at me. For a moment, I thought he might stay. But then his shoulders dropped, and I saw it, the choice he was making. The same choice he had made at the wedding. Go, I said softly. She's waiting. He hesitated for just a second more, then turned and walked out. I stood in the doorway, watching him cross the porch, get into the car. Chloe didn't look at me. She just gestured for him to drive. As they pulled away, I felt the sadness, but I wasn't surprised. Some people never change. The next morning, Kareem arrived to take me to the airport. He found me sitting in the empty living room, holding the framed photo of James's graduation. Second thoughts? He asked gently, sitting beside me on the floor. I shook my head. No. Just saying goodbye to who I used to be. And who was that? Someone who thought love meant sacrifice. Someone who believed that if I gave enough, suffered enough, I'd earn the love I wanted. I set the photo down. I'm tired of earning love, Kareem. I want to just receive it. You will, he said. Every day for the rest of our lives. The flight to Dubai was long, but for the first time in years, I didn't mind the hours stretching ahead of me. There was no rush to get home, no list of chores waiting, no phone calls demanding favors or money. I leaned back in my seat, closed my eyes, and slept more soundly than I had in my own bed in months. When I woke, the view out the window stole my breath. The golden shoreline curving along the Persian Gulf, sunlight shimmering over water so clear it looked unreal. The city rose behind it, a mix of glass towers and traditional domes, modern and ancient all at once. Kareem was waiting at the terminal, his smile warm but not showy. He took my bag from me without asking, as though it was the most natural thing in the world, and guided me toward his car. His villa was even more beautiful than he had described. White walls and arched doorways framed rooms flooded with sunlight. In the back, a garden bloomed with flowers I didn't recognize, their colors so vivid they almost looked painted. The air carried a hint of the sea, soft and salty. This is home, he said quietly as we stepped inside. I didn't answer right away. The word home had always been tied to a specific place for me. A house I'd worked to keep, a kitchen table I'd cleaned night after night, rooms where I'd waited for James to come back from school. Now, for the first time, I realized home could be anywhere I was cared for. The first week was quiet. We moved through the villa at an unhurried pace. In the mornings, we drank coffee on the terrace, the sun warming our faces as the waves rolled in the distance. In the afternoons, we wandered through markets, tasting foods I'd never heard of, listening to the hum of different languages blending together. In the evenings, we cooked together. Or rather, Kareem cooked, and I learned. It was strange at first, not to feel the pull of my phone. I'd turned it on once, out of habit, and saw dozens of missed calls and unread messages from numbers I didn't recognize. None from James. I powered it off again. Kareem never asked about him unless I brought it up. And I found that I didn't, not because I didn't care, but because every time I thought of him now, the ache was smaller, dulled by distance and the knowledge that I had finally stopped chasing what he couldn't give me. 3 months after I arrived, we were married in the garden behind the villa. It was a small ceremony, just a few of Kareem's closest friends. I wore a dress the color of a summer sunset, and Kareem couldn't stop smiling as we stood together under a simple arch of flowers. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, Pure, uncomplicated joy. James didn't call. He didn't write. There was no card, no message, not even an acknowledgement from him that I had remarried. I thought the silence would hurt, but it didn't. It felt clean, like closing a door that had been stuck half open for too long. Life with Kareem was simple in the ways that mattered and rich in the ways I had never imagined. We traveled to places I'd only read about in magazines. We stood in art galleries so quiet you could hear your own breath. We wandered through busy spice markets where the air was thick with cinnamon, cardamom, and saffron. In the stillness of our evenings, I began to feel my shoulders loosen, as though a weight I'd carried for 40 years had finally been set down. One night, as we sat on the terrace watching the sun sink into the Gulf, Kareem reached for my hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. I thought of James, probably sitting in his house, maybe realizing too late what he'd traded. I thought of Chloe, likely searching for her next opportunity, her next audience. I thought of all the years I'd spent trying to earn love from people who didn't know how to give it. "No," I said honestly. "I only regret not doing it sooner." He squeezed my hand gently, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. That night, as I lay beside him, I realized that this quiet, this peace, was the life I had been waiting to live. Not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. A year had passed since the night I walked out of my son's wedding. 12 months of new sunsets, new tastes, and new laughter. 12 months without the weight of constant judgment or the sting of being treated as disposable. Kareem and I had settled into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. New because every day in Dubai offered something I'd never experienced. Familiar because being beside him felt like stepping into a story we had started decades ago and were finally finishing. I had stopped checking my phone for messages from James long ago. At first, I thought it would be the hardest habit to break, but over time, I realized I had been more addicted to hope than to the phone itself. Hope that one day he would wake up and see me not as a resource, not as a punchline, but as his mother, a human being worthy of respect. That hope had kept me tethered to pain for far too long. Letting it go wasn't easy. But it was necessary. On my 63rd birthday, Kareem arranged a small dinner in our garden. Lanterns hung from the trees, their light swaying in the warm evening breeze. We were halfway through the meal when the gate bell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When Kareem opened the gate, my heart stumbled in my chest. James. He stood there, looking older than I remembered, his hair thinner, his face more lined. His suit was rumpled, as if he'd been wearing it for hours. For a moment, I couldn't move. "Mom," he said, his voice low. Kareem stepped aside, giving him space to enter. I sat back in my chair, my hands resting on the table, calm but alert. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he stood there, shifting from foot to foot like a boy about to confess to something. "I'm sorry for showing up uninvited. I didn't know if you'd even see me." I gestured to the chair across from me. "You're here now." When he sat, his eyes dropped to his hands. "I don't know where to start." "The beginning usually works," I said gently, though my tone carried an edge of caution. "I messed up," he said after a pause. "No. I was awful to you. Not just that night but for years. I thought you'd always be there, no matter how I treated you. I thought, I don't know, that it was your job to put up with me." I said nothing, letting him fill the silence. "When you left I was angry," he continued. "I told myself you were selfish, that you'd chosen money and comfort over your family. But, the truth is, I didn't have a family for you to choose. I had a son who only called when he needed something, and a daughter-in-law who saw you as an inconvenience." His voice cracked slightly, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the boy I used to know. The boy who had cried into my shirt after scraping his knee. The boy who used to run to the door when I came home from work. "I don't know if I can undo the damage," he said quietly. "But I want to try. I miss you." I took a slow breath. "Do you miss me, James? Or do you miss the version of me who gave without asking for anything back?" His eyes lifted to meet mine. "I miss you. The real you. And I think I'm finally ready to love you the way you deserve." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to rush into his arms and pretend the last decade hadn't happened. But the woman sitting at this table wasn't the same one who had stood on the sidelines of her own life for so long. "I'm glad you came," I said softly. "And I hear your apology. But forgiveness isn't a door you can just walk through. It's a bridge you have to build, and building takes time." He nodded, swallowing hard. I'll do the work. I don't expect you to move back. I hope you'll let me be part of your life again. I glanced at Kareem, who sat quietly beside me, giving me space to decide. Then I looked back at James. You can be part of my life, James. But you need to understand. My life is here now. It's not centered around you anymore. It's centered around me. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then he nodded slowly. I understand. We finished dinner together. Awkwardly at first, then with small sparks of warmth. He even laughed once, a real laugh, the kind that came from his chest. It wasn't a perfect reunion, but it wasn't meant to be. It was the first step onto that bridge. When James left later that night, he hugged me tighter than he had in years. As he walked away, I realized something important. Whether he rebuilt that bridge or not, I would be okay. Because my worth was no longer tied to his choices. Weeks later, I stood on the terrace, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. Kareem joined me, sliding an arm around my shoulders. You look thoughtful, he said. I'm thinking about how much has changed, I replied. A year ago, I was a woman being auctioned off for $8 in front of strangers. Now, I'm a wife. A traveler. A woman who knows her own worth. And? He asked, smiling. And I've learned something, I said, turning to look at him. Sometimes, the people you love the most will not love you in the way you deserve. And you have two choices. Stay and shrink yourself to fit their idea of you, or leave and grow into the person you were meant to be. Kareem's smile deepened. And you chose. I chose me, I said simply. And it saved my life. We stood there in silence, the waves rolling in below, the light spilling over everything like a blessing. And I knew, this wasn't just the ending of my story. It was the beginning of the life I had always deserved. Moral lesson. Never let the people you love convince you that your value depends on what you can give them. Love given without respect is not love. It's dependency. You are not obligated to stay where you are diminished. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's the first step toward living fully. The right people will never make you question your worth. They will see it, honor it, and protect it without being asked.